The dawn of civilization. Primitive. Dangerous. Exciting. The handwriting is on the wall. If the human race is ever going to amount to anything, it needs
the most civilized caveman I have ever seen.
Look who's come out of his cave.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. This is James and Brendan from Cave Dweller. Again, Matt is not with us for time zone differences, but we have Jem from Australian band Dead with us today. And he's going to tell us a little bit about an album they released earlier this year, the Australian music scene, and a bunch of other topics. So welcome aboard, man.
G'day. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Happy to have you here. So basically, for anyone who doesn't know these guys, they're a bit of an institution in Australia. They have an extensive catalogue. They've worked with pretty much all the big bands in the country. Jem, you make up half the band. You're a two-piece act. Do you want to tell us a little bit about who you guys are and sort of how you came to be?
Yeah, well, so we just turned 10 sometime this month. Not that there was anything we could do to really celebrate that. So we've been doing it 10 years. This is the first year ever that we haven't been touring. And we played for a few years before that in a three-piece together called Fangs Of, with Mikey from, I don't know if you remember the Brisbane band Brain Resin.
No, I don't think I know those guys.
But so yeah, we had a band together before Dead, and then like every two-piece I've ever been in, you get left with who's the most dedicated, and you just go, fuck it, let's keep going.
Yeah.
So there was never really a plan to be a band, if that makes sense. It was sort of just that we were aware that the two of us wanted a lot. We were asking a lot, you know, of anyone that would play with us as far as commitment and what you get back for that. So we just went, fuck it. I actually didn't even know that Jace could play bass, honestly. and I was skeptical, which sounds so stupid. I was skeptical whether he could because I'd only seen him play guitar. Anyway, it was the first band I think where I formed where I thought, I don't really care what it sounds like or what happens. We just know that we work well together and we'll have fun, you know. So we've just let it be what it wants to be. We both have a lot of ideas and have kind of not necessarily short attention spans, but I suppose high ambitions. So yeah, we're just so far. There's very little that either of us would say no to, you know, as far as trying something out.
I know that you're not just partners in Dead. You also run We Empty Rooms together. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, I mean, I started that in 2005, so a little while before I met Jace, and that's just mainly been a vehicle for, well, particularly recently because Dead is so active, it's mainly serves just to release the music that I'm putting out. But then, you know, I've done some stuff with the Hard-Ons and Nunchucker Superfly and Creston Spiers from Harvey Milk. It's kind of just, you know, like I try not to put out too much stuff because I'm just aware of how much energy it takes, and I don't necessarily have that much. You often have the enthusiasm, but you don't have the time. But every now and then there's stuff where I just like, fuck, man, I can't. That record's just going to sit there and no one's going to release it. Or in the case of the Hard-Ons, we just have a good working relationship where they know that I'll get the job done. I know that they'll sell every last record. So that's kind of, you know, symbiotic.
So for anyone who doesn't know the Hard-Ons, which will probably be a lot of people outside of Australia, that's another fantastic band that you guys should definitely check out. Myself and a lot of my friends are super into those dudes. I imagine that they're probably pretty fun to work with, just from what I've seen and heard about them.
Yeah, they're great. I mean, they're both. Jace played in a band with them for a while. I've played on a few of Blackie's solo records. Yeah, my old band, or every band I've been in, really has done a lot with Nunchucker. They're sort of other band, you know, like it's the same members, or it's the same two, Blackie and Ray. They're really easy to work with. They're old school. They're from a time before myself, like as far as the industry. They're a little more, I guess I come from a very, very DIY place. They're a little bit more open to collaboration. So they're not if I put out a record of theirs, they're not over my shoulders checking every last thing I do. They kind of give me a fair bit of free rein, you know.
Right.
So it's fun to do that, and it's really fun to do that with a band where I know I don't have to absolutely work my ass off to sell every last copy, you know. Like, I'm more servicing people that, I mean, if I put out a Hard-Ons record without fail, you know, there's a couple of hundred people, most of them are in Europe or Australia, who will buy it straight away, and I kind of know them by name. And, you know, and because they've toured so much here and in Europe particularly, they've got like that. Same with us, they have that direct contact with their fans, you know.
Right.
And so, yeah, I love working with them, and I always learn something. And they're a bit like us in the sense that they just don't stop, you know.
Right.
Nothing really slows them down.
Yeah, you guys have put out quite a bit of music over the years. I had a look just before we came on again through your catalog, and there's quite a bit in there. What number release was Raving Drooling for you guys as far as full lengths go?
I think it's the 9th. If it just depends, you know, what your rules are, because I guess it's kind of like, yeah, I don't know. People don't use the word EP so much anymore, but I would say it's the 9th as far as an album that's, you know, had that little bit of extra planning and stuff, and you know, not being a live album or something like that. Yeah, right,
or like a split or a single or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
So just before we talk about Raving Drooling, on the topic of what you're talking about putting out albums and being picky with what you do, Brendan and I actually read a really interesting post recently from, Brendan, was it the dude who ran Transylvania Tapes that posted that really big status about?
It was. Yeah, basically he was saying that when you were a band and you want to constantly just put out vinyl and like don't have any wiggle room, you're basically kind of shooting yourself in the foot by doing so, you know, like with the amount of time and stuff like that, you're also putting yourself on a lot of restrictions and whatnot. So like where you can put more content onto like a CD or a tape versus like just only an LP vinyl or like a double disc, you know, vinyl, which ends up being like more expensive, you know, and takes more time to make and do and produce. So basically, you know, it's just like having these bands like that only want to do that, like they're literally just, they're not going to go anywhere. They're not going to do anything.
Well, that was half of it. The other half I was thinking of was what he was talking about with, there's a lot of labels out there who are just so enthusiastic to pump out music that they think that if they just put it out, people will buy it. And you got all these bands who think because they have music with a couple of downloads on Bandcamp type thing, that it's worth a label's time to automatically put out an album of theirs.
Right.
And it kind of came down to the point that like you get those labels that just burn out and destroy themselves by being too enthusiastic and kind of signing and putting out any artist that they come across.
Yeah, well, you know, we've watched a few friends' labels go through that burnout, and one in particular, really, really excellent label out of Portland, Oregon, that did a release of our second album. So that they were, and hopefully they'll kind of resurrect, but they are called Aeolian Empire, and they also all played in a band called Rabbits, who were just fucking great, like really, really excellent band. But, you know, sometimes it's just bad luck as well, because they had a really bad run of putting out bands that were awesome and pretty active, that then very, very quickly in a short period of time with each other all broke up. There's sort of not a lot you can do when that happens, you know, like particularly at the DIY level, like unless you've written some sort of contract, I suppose, which you can do it, I suppose, but yeah, you could write some sort of a contract that says, you know, you have to stay together for the next 2 years, or if not, but it just wouldn't happen, you know, like it just. And so that was just really bad luck. And I honestly, I watched everything about what they did, I absolutely loved and really resonated with. And they put a lot of effort into their promo, and they were different about it and creative. And it's just one of those things where at that level, that sort of music, particularly heavy underground music, it really relies on touring to promote it, because we don't have a lot of going on this podcast is it's not, what am I trying to say? When you don't quite fit into a scene, you know, or a sound, you do have a lot less options as far as promoting what you do. And yeah, and I'm sort of inclined to agree with this Transylvania person about vinyl. It's a strange thing. We have kind of sat down every time we make a record, thought about how do we want to release it. We've both kind of made it pretty clear to each other that the important thing is the music, not what medium it's on. But we might have painted ourselves into a corner a bit as well, because Jace does all the art and I hand screen print most of our covers, and we've kind of created a following that predominantly that's how they interact with us. So this latest album, we've done tape, CD and vinyl, and the vinyl just like absolutely kills everything else as far as how people buy our music. You know, it probably goes vinyl, then CDs and tapes, and then downloads are just almost not, like, we can't even consider that a form of income. It's kind of laughable. Like we might sell 1,000 LPs of an album and maybe like 12 downloads. And
that's interesting.
It's pretty heartbreaking too, because to us we think, fuck man, the download is the greatest way to just, as a fan, to just buy the music of a DIY band. You know, like cut out all that risk, cut out all that outlay, and but people, generally speaking, particularly I think in our demographic and like anyone younger than us, like, you know, we've played gigs with a few people sort of 18, 19 around here. Those kids have they've only interacted with streaming. Like that's what, the concept to them of having to pay for music is really like weird, bizarre. Yeah. And they get that, like, maybe you should, like, that's a good thing to do. But it's almost like, you know, congratulations to me, I'm such a good person. I paid for one out of 500 albums that I regularly, you know what I mean? Like it's, so you have to sort of work with it. And yeah, I mean, the vinyl thing it is crazy in the sense that it can cost a lot. And also you're only one release away from kind of financial ruin as a label. But like I said, look, we keep it, we do fairly low runs. We know our fan base pretty well now. And yeah, we have no interest in making more records than we can actually sell. And as a rule, we don't do that. So we don't have boxes of any of our albums, you know. We know enough about how it works now that we put it out, put a lot of effort into selling it, it sells, and then the day that we put a new record out, it slows right down. You know what I mean? People generally don't. People generally buy the new one, you know.
And I think it's a good idea to do that limited release thing. I actually think that it kind of motivates people a little bit to buy because they don't want to miss out, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot of, you know, I really grappled with this stuff when I started the label. It's weird. You know, there are certain things that are just natural to you. You know, when I started making music, I think I recorded my first album when I was 14 or 15. And there are certain things that you just think, particularly when you're young, you don't realize that, this is not what everyone does. So, you know, I learnt to play music through improvising with other musicians. I literally learned how to play the drums doing that. And that meant, you know, sometimes playing for 6 hours straight and not knowing the names of the other people you were playing with. And so collaborating has always been a big part of music to me. And only recently did I think, not everyone started that way. Some people started by like learning covers or something, you know. And then same when you go to release an album, you know, the first album we did in my first band, you know, maybe not everyone now that I think of it, but certainly me and the bass player who were the kind of drivers behind the band, you know, every little thing was so important, you know, like what photo is going to go in the package and taking probably several trips to the CD pressing plant, you know, and kind of really annoying the bloke there because we wanted you know what I mean? And then it all felt so important. And then we realized, you know, that was when CDs were the thing and minimum was 500. And then we went, oh shit, we can't actually sell 500. So then the next album we started hand making our covers because we knew that we could. And this is actually the interesting thing to me. Back in those days, so early 2000s, we were constantly like critiqued for hand making our records. Like,
really?
Basically, like, what? It's not even printed properly. And we were like, hang on, we're screen printers. Like, we know that this is better printing. It's just not what you're used to. But as soon as the streaming thing became the norm and downloading became the norm and all of that, suddenly, you know, something handmade took on a different value, like, and less sort of dodgy DIY and more, you know, they're little imperfections. So, but I did really grapple with, I remember learning early on that, okay, it's a bit of a thing here in the underground to, like, you know, hand number everything. And for some reason I didn't want to do that. So I remember our first few CDs that I released on the label, I just stamped on it and it said limited to around 100 copies. Because I didn't want to, like, specify what your number was. And it just sounds stupid now. But I really grappled with that whole, with Dead, we have no interest in exclusivity for the sake of, like, we do get quite a few people, you know, sending us abusive messages or whatever, like, oh, you're being elitist and stuff. And I'm like, fuck you. Like, have you handmade 100 box sets before? Like, there is no profit in it. So we make, you know, as many boxes or as many hand printed covers or whatever as we can be fucked to make and that we know we can sell, you know, like, and there's no point, you know, doing more than that because then that's just money that we're losing, you know. So there's sort of several layers to, we did, when COVID first hit, we did an edition of one of our albums. We did an edition of 19 because we just knew there'll be 19 people that will buy something that ridiculous from us. And, you know, we did lino print covers and I had a set of stamps, you know, like ABC to the end, and I hand stamped letter by letter every song title. And that was just one of those things where I was like, 19 is enough of that. I don't want to fucking do that again. Like, I've lost interest, you know, like that. And that's how art works. So, you know, Jace is a genuine artist. He's actually, you know, got a degree in it. I'm a kind of
your covers are sweet.
Yeah, thanks. And he knows what he's doing. You know, again, when I first met him, I thought, he just kind of likes drawing cartoons. And then a few years ago, we were on tour in Europe, and he made this sort of like impressionist drawing of where we were staying the night. And I just was like, shit, I didn't know you actually knew how to do all that stuff. But he kind of, you know, prefers that more comic style. But yeah, so both of us having the kind of brain that's, you know, inclined towards art, I suppose, is you get that rush when you have an idea, you execute it, and then after that, you know, you want to move on to the next thing. So that's what we tend to do. I really, like, all the promotion and all of that is all me. When I say it's all me, I mean Jace might make a film clip, or, you know, if I ask him to do something, he'll do it. But as far as the business side of it, that's all down to me. And I'm constantly kind of grappling between, I just want to make music. I don't really want to have to sell it. But if I don't put any effort into selling it, then we won't have as much opportunities to make another record. So now I kind of divvy it up into time. I just say, all right, I'm going to spend 5 days where I don't go to work and I do spend it on promo, and that's what it's going to cost us, you know, like, that's what it's going to cost me, I should say. I'm going to lose 5 days of employment, and I'm going to put all of that into promo, and then after that I, you know, have to kind of call it quits. I can't just keep, you know, because it's not profitable for us.
And did I see
wild.
that you signed something with Forbidden Place Records?
Yeah, they've just released our tape, or that they did the tape of the album, and they are going to do a CD version of Raving Drooling as well.
It's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big record.
Those guys are
company,
really cool.
I think they put out a lot of quality stuff.
Oh, cool. So I actually discovered them through. Do you know the podcast Undetermined?
No.
So they're out of Kansas City and Missouri, maybe. Anyway, and I just did a podcast with them and asked them about labels in that area, because it's sort of an area we haven't ever hit when we tour. We kind of tend to go around in a bit of a ring in the States, that is. And, anyway, they mentioned them, and they were super enthusiastic, and they've been the only label I think I've ever worked with that just paid us.
That's awesome.
Did you deal with Kale? I think it's pronounced Brueggemann.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, he's a nice dude.
Yeah, so I forget where, one of them lives in Salt Lake City and one of them's in like Iowa.
Okay.
And yeah, like, you know, for us, we're pretty realistic when we work with a label where, I mean, I don't know, it's funny that I think the music industry is constantly like struggling to not, like everyone in the industry kind of thinks that something that worked 10 years ago is still going to work. You know,
right.
I think increasingly that is not the case, in the sense that I think increasingly things can change really quickly.
I think this year kind of proved that to some extent.
Definitely. And so, you know, I put a little bit of time, not too much, because I know it's not likely to be fruitful, but I tend to send our stuff out to labels that I think might be able to kind of help us reach a bigger audience. And by and large, you know, you don't hear back, or they just say no thanks. And the weirder thing that I've noticed over the last few years is labels that I write to won't write back, don't have any interest, but they actually buy our fucking album off me. And I'm like, Jesus, dude, I would have just given it to you if you just answered your fucking email. Like, you know, and you didn't even have to put the record out. You could have just, you know, replied to me and given me something, you know. And that to me kind of sums up being in a band like Dead, you know, in 2020, where like music is increasingly splitting up into these tiny subgenres, none of which we can fit into. And the labels seem to increasingly, you know, service those genres rather than service, you know, the outsiders. And so, yeah, when we deal with a label like Forbidden Place, you know, at that size, I'm pretty upfront. I just say, look, don't rip us off. And if you find us 10 new fans, like, that's a win to us. We're not under any illusion that that you're going to suddenly, you know, help us explode and become, you know, huge or anything. But we're more sort of focused on keeping contact with the fans that we have. And I guess now that it's been 10 years, it's like, oh shit, man, some of these people they've really come on this journey with us. Like, we've done some weird shit and they've supported all of it. So
yeah, I get where you're coming from with that, because I mean, you probably seen from our side, we deal with a lot of really different music. Like, our span is pretty huge. And we've covered quite a few bands that are in the same situation as you, where they don't really fit into any one category. And they all seem to have the same issue that you guys do, is just finding a label or a promo company even sometimes that will suit their sound and what they're trying to do with the band. So I get that it's an issue in the industry for bands that really don't fit into any niche genre. Yeah,
it's funny that you should say promo as well, because you would think, you know, finding a publicist or something wouldn't be that hard. But to be fair, the Australian publicists, I have to give them credit for all being honest and not just taking our money. But every publicist in Australia I've ever written to, particularly if we're like looking at applying for grants and stuff, and then I think, oh, okay, if we get the grant, which we never do, but, you know, if we do, you know, then we'll use a publicist. Every Australian publicist I've ever written to has just gone, yeah, no way. Like, we know who you are. And it's not worth, you know, you're just going to waste your money, because basically we're old enough now that everyone knows a few things. One is that we're not young, so that's that box. You know, that's the first thing that's important these days.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no mystery, like as in they know that we're not willing to pay for content, so it's not even worth trying. They're just like, we know who you are and we know that you're kind of a pain in the ass, so don't bother because you won't get anywhere here. Whereas overseas, you know, ironically, I'm talking to Australian, I know, but overseas there's a little more scope, you know, but Australia is, you know, it's a small place as far as population, and it's still pretty old school about, I just don't think there's as much of this kind of thing, this kind of independent thing that you're doing.
You and I had a chat about that, how they really, outside of the radio stations, pretty much, there's not that much in Australia as far as music review and interviews and all that type of thing goes.
No, there's like been a couple, I think, like the Silver Lining or whatever to the COVID stuff. Like we cancelled our US tour and we cancelled like 20 Australian dates. And that was pretty heartbreaking because we put a lot of effort into organising that. But the sort of one silver lining was then I got left with time where I went, all right, I'm going to put more into the kind of online promotion than we normally do, because what we normally do is just play shows and just sell albums at shows and keep it that way. And I realised, shit, you know, we can't play a single show now for perhaps years. So there are, I think, a few more Aussie ones opened up, you know, because I guess a lot of people are in the same position where they had a bit more time.
Well, that's how we started too. We just started with the COVID because we had time on our hands, and like, I've always wanted to do this, and we kind of just did it, and it kind of worked.
Yeah, well, there you go. So there's been a little bit more of it, but yeah, the Australian thing is generally, again, I reckon it's usually about 10 years out of date, and we're just very pragmatic, and we go, we can't justify $300 for an ad in your paper. Like who reads the fucking paper anymore anyway? But
right.
But say you were a bigger band, like that is charging $30 per ticket, and you know, and you're generally playing to 300 or more people, then you might say, oh yeah, $300 for an ad, that's actually worth it. That's if we sell an extra 10 tickets, then it pays itself. Off. But for us, we're looking at shows where we're under pressure to keep it to $10 or 15 max, and you know, we're playing 100-person band. It just sort of the maths of it. You go, hang on, we'd need like a fair few extra people just to justify the ad, and it's just so hard to. You always think, oh, that could be spent on something so much cooler. You know, like that's a day in the studio. That's, you know, like I think we can put this to better use. So that's just always been our approach. And we've watched other bands do the more standard approach, and it works for them for a short while. It works for them until they stop feeding that system. And it's just not sustainable. They just basically, I always think of, you know, it's probably no surprise we're big fans of the band Big Business. And one of their albums, I can't remember where it was. One of their albums just has written on it, projecting an image of success. And that to me is like so many Australian bands. It's just what they do for as long as they can afford it, you know?
I just have to say while we're talking about them, how, if you know the track Lonely Lyle.
Oh, yeah.
I love that song, man. That is such a good song.
Yeah, I love it when he gets all, you know, like Les Miserables sort of. Yeah, he's an amazing
it's a solid track.
They were opening for Sleep last year, and then I ended up not able to go to the show, and I was like, oh my God, it's in New York. It's like really not far away from me. Like I could probably make this happen. And then so much work stuff, and I couldn't do it. I was like, oh, it would have been such a cool show to see them do.
Have you seen them play?
I haven't seen them. No, not live.
Oh, no, they're awesome. We've played with them a few times. Yeah, they are an absolute, just like, it's just like being caught in a storm of thunder, you know. Like They managed to be really articulate, but just so powerful. Yeah.
I actually remember when I reviewed your album, I know that was months ago now, but I definitely saw the influence that you guys, they had on you guys with their music.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, their first album is on the same label as us in the US, Wantage USA. And there's a...
Oh, yeah.
So that label, you know, going back to sort of label stuff, that label definitely was an influence on me because I reckon I discovered that label around the time I started We Empty Rooms and kind of felt a kinship in their sense of humor and you know, there's a thing, I was doing stuff DIY at such a young age. I had no idea that the term DIY existed. And I remember...
Right, you were living.
Yeah, and I remember being sort of 18, 19 or something, and my band at the time, you know, Tommy kind of came and told me, hey, this term DIY exists, and we just pissed ourselves laughing because we're like, who else would do it? Like, what do they think they're fucking special because they did it themselves? Like, there's no one else to do it. Like, and so then I, you know, learned that, okay, there is this whole DIY punk world. And I also learned how uptight it can be and how many fucking rules there can be. And, you know, I learned about, having, you know, rules written on the toilet doors of punk spaces about how to behave. And I was just like, Jesus Christ, we've got to do better than this, you know, like if we need to tell people not to be pricks, you know, like, then I think we've lost them anyway. You know, if someone's a prick, a little note asking them not to be racist isn't going to stop them, you know. So going off the tangent here. Oh, yeah, and so then with Wantage USA, I sort of realised, okay, they've got a similar sort of cynical sense of humour to me, and I kind of it's just a different version of that. Okay, it had some ties to the DIY thing, which we do as well, but it was also more about celebrating being an individual and just doing your own thing, you know. I think that's what really bummed me out about discovering the DIY scene, is I was like, okay, so what this means is you do it yourself, but you all do it the same way, you know. There's a sort of imagery to it, you know. And I was like, well, we don't want to do that. We want to use more colours than black and white, you know, and we want to put care into our packaging because we care. So yeah. Anyway, so with the big business thing, it's totally like there is definitely, you know, some kinship there as far as taking the piss out of, you know, metal and punk a bit, but in a loving way, like in that it's genuinely, you know, we have a real love of heavy music, but we don't need to be all doom and gloom about it, you know.
Yeah, you guys have some really cool song titles and whatnot, you know, like I love it.
Thanks.
So I was listening to Thunder, and I was just like going through and I was like, wait, this song is awesome. Like, what is this? And then I was like, oh, all right. These guys have got some humor here, you know, like, I love it. It's just so funny. I think one of my favorite songs off that one was Wherever You Go, We Will Catch You. It was good. I was listening to it and I was like, whoa, okay. And that's when I just started kind of paying attention to all the names on all the songs, you know.
Well, yeah, that was a good example for me of a song. Like, I'm just trying to think, like, I kind of reckon that song was something that Jace just... We tend to write collaboratively to an extent, although more and more it's also just like Jace is such a good writer and writes so much, and I'm often too busy doing the business side of things that now sometimes I just go, he can just finish the song. I know it'll be good. Like, I don't even need to. But I think that was a good example, that song of, you know, he kind of just came to the rehearsal room with that written as this is what is going to happen structurally. And, you know, I suppose I just started playing a beat. I don't really know how that bit came into it, but just that's sort of not an approach, you know, pre-playing with Jace. All the music I played was always I guess we would just improvise for hours and hours and then pull out the bits that we liked and then kind of tape together some weird song that didn't really have a, super King Crimson influenced and stuff. It didn't really have a point to it necessarily. It was just things that we liked putting next to each other. But with Jace, he has more of that pop sensibility, or that, the simplicity of, this is a song. There's going to be this riff, and then I'm going to whistle this melody, and then that's it. And that was a lot of fun, So yeah, I really enjoy that part of Dead too. That we can be like, I think a lot of people focus on, geez, you make a lot of noise for two people, and we do. But I actually really love the other extreme as well. That we can be really quiet if we want.
Was that sort of the same with Nunchucker Superfly? Is that just something you did, like, that was just fun for you too?
Oh, we're not in that band. So that is the band which is Blackie and Ray from Hard Ons. Yeah. Oh. You should, if you're a Hard Ons fan, I guarantee you'll like Nunchucker. So yeah, no, we're not in them.
The track. Sorry, from your.
I was like, this is getting awkward. This dude doesn't even know what band I'm in.
No.
Sorry. So, what was the question? What about Nunchucker?
No, it's like the fourth track on your latest album, Nunchucker Superfly. Yeah, did you guys have fun playing that one?
Oh yeah, it's sometimes when we're writing stuff. I mean, we named it that. Sorry, because more and more we just realise when we're writing a song, we're like, this is just a tribute to Vaz, isn't it? Or this is just a tribute to, whoever. Or sometimes that's just how it helps me approach the song. Like, we're writing a song at the moment that for me is our fucking Champs song. I don't think it is for Jace, but for me, I'm just trying to play the way, sort of, what would they do? And I think when we were writing Nunchucker Superfly, it was sort of like our version of, we're always really but we're both really interested in the idea of heavy metal from the kind of Motorhead perspective, like where everything sounds like it might fall apart at any minute, and you're sort of just keeping it under control. That to me is, I think to both of us, that's what excites us about metal, as opposed to the kind of other extreme of metal. It's like that, diligent, sounds like someone's just typing on a keyboard, that doesn't excite us. So, sorry, and I always forget because we tend to have our working titles and then the titles once the album comes out, and we never remember what the real names are. And sometimes when we're writing set lists, I have to force Jace into learning the new name. I'm like, come on, we called it that, so let's start using the real name. Right. You gave me like a heart attack for a second. I was like, what in the band? It's just funny because there's been a few times where we've done interviews too, and you're on air, like on the radio. And sometimes you're caught up for like 20 minutes before you're on air, and then you're on air. And it's then that they choose to try and work out who you are and what you do. And are you fucking serious? We just had 20 minutes where you could have
asked me.
You're making us both look foolish now. Yeah.
That's pretty awkward.
That song was so much fun because we knew we wanted a solo, and Jace felt a bit like, I've kind of done enough guitar on the album. And we asked Creston if he wanted to do it, and he said yes, and that was a really big deal for me. And then what was even weirder was he asked for direction, like he said, you got to give me the instructions, and that felt really strange because I was like, dude, you're like honestly one of my favorite guitarists of all time. How am I supposed to? But it was a really good lesson. I was like, all right, no, that's what a good band does is.
Yeah, he wants your input, He doesn't want to, make a mistake or like try and take it over, He's helping you out,
Yeah, and it was heaps of fun, and he did it. I was really, really happy because basically he said, all right, give me, he basically said, give me an hour and I'll send it back to you, and don't use it if it's not right or whatever. And I really loved that he just did a one take thing. I was a bit worried. Sometimes when you ask for guest stuff, they think they've got to overdo it, and they send you back like 3 tracks. Or it was just great. It kind of was the little cherry on top. And it's something that we try to, in our albums, we're aware that if the whole album is just the two of us, it might get a little bit monotonous. So it's nice to pepper it with a few guests.
I fully agree on that one. I always really appreciate some good cameos and like guest appearances in albums. Brendan, are you familiar with Creston Spiers?
I don't think so.
So,
do you know the band Harvey Milk?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's from Harvey Milk.
Ah, okay. Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and he's, look, as far as, again, like I was saying, when I first started playing music, it was only ever collaborating. So to me, that's pretty natural. The fun thing about it for us is just getting someone else's perspective and trusting them. Like, very rarely have we tried to have a guest on something and then gone, it's actually not working, We generally just go with people that we know we like what they do, and there's a mutual respect. It's like there's only one guest actually I've ever asked that like declined, and that was Bliss Blood from Pain Teens. I don't know if Pain Teens were like in the really great band, and they had some stuff out on the label Trance Syndicate. So I guess some like crossover there with like Butthole Surfers and sort of like an industrial, I don't know what you call them, industrial kind of weirdo poppy grunge band or something. Anyway, and I really wanted her to sing on one of our songs on the second album, and she said no. But it was actually worked out for the best, because I was like, fuck, actually there's an Australian woman we can use that's even better. And we did. Mm-hmm. We used Linda J from Little Ugly Girls. And what was I getting at? Had Bliss Blood done it, that might have been the only time that I'm sort of glad that she said no, because the thing for us is any guests we work with, they're very familiar with what we do. I think it would be different, if you were just randomly asking someone because, you wanted their name on your record or something, and then they just give you something really inappropriate.
I think that does happen, though. You can kind of tell when that does happen on an album.
Yeah, well, look, we worked out pretty early on with stuff like that it doesn't, at least for us, it doesn't equate to, there's no point in doing shit for that reason. In fact, going back to the band Nunchucker Superfly, they are the greatest example of that to me, in the sense that you have the same two songwriters in two different bands, and one, being the Hard-Ons, can consistently sell out venues, mm-hmm. and the other struggles to. And it's like, it's the same fucking people. So
the sound that sells.
Yeah, and it's the brand. Like the Hard-Ons used to have a T-shirt that just said, not a band, just a brand. They've proven it. It's like, if they released anything under the name Hard-Ons, it will sell better than anything under the name Nunchucker. Like, they know that, and they work with it. They're not shitty about it. They're sort of glass half full kind of people.
It's a bit weird about that. Like in the Australian scene, another example of that, I think, is Tropical Fuckstorm. Yeah. You know how the lead singer was also
and
in
the bass player.
Yeah, and the bass player. Yeah. It's kind of weird how you talk to a lot of people these days who are like, I guess maybe newer in the punk scene or whatever, but they're like, yeah, I love Tropical Fuckstorm. You're like, oh, well, yeah, do you like the drones too? They're like, who are the drones?
They're actually, it's funny you should bring them up, because they're one of the few examples I can think of that have successfully, like, when the drones got as big as they did, I didn't expect them to. I guess they used to be a lot noisier when I first started watching them, and they kind of, I suppose, as they became less aggressive sound-wise, then they became more popular. But they were still pretty, at times, like, pretty harsh on stage. But yeah, to their credit, Gaz and Fee, they've made two of the biggest fucking bands in the country. Like, that's not an accident then. Like, to have one band, i.e. the Drones, like, all right, cool, yeah, a bit of luck played into that, good on you. But to then go, all right, we're going to basically stop doing that and form another one, and to have it get, basically just as big and in a different sort of demographic, that's a super rarity, because it seems mostly what happens is, if you're in a band as big as the Drones and you stop and do something else, it's never going to be as big.
Right.
But, good on them. Like, they've done very well.
They really have. They've actually done pretty well overseas as well. So I've met some people who actually know who they are outside of Australia.
I've heard that, and I've heard that they do well in the States. And I don't know if you have this experience, maybe even more so in Brisbane because it's such a smaller city. But like, it's always sort of a bit amusing, when an Australian band is treated like they're some sort of royalty or something, and you're like, that's just the dude that serves me beers at that. Like, you know what I mean? It doesn't really matter how big they are. Like, I think I ended up somewhere on a bus or something once with one of the members of Powderfinger or whatever, and I was like, I'm aware that you're big, but to me, you're just a yobbo. Like, you're just a dude that plays in a band, and I get it that you got big, but you're not a rock star.
You're that guy still.
Yeah.
You know who that happened to me with?
They're good friends. Yeah.
That's awesome. But back when they really first started up, before they brought out their first album, Bite Your Head Off, I saw them in a really small concert in Toowoomba. And I was having like a long chat with Matthew, like Matthew Young. And he was just such a nice, down-to-earth dude, just sitting at the merch table, just talking to people. And then they just blew up. And now everyone overseas knows exactly who they are. When I tell people, like, yeah, man, I met him at a small gig and he sold me like a CD and stuff. They're like, what?
Yeah. It is, yeah, and he's just still youngy to me he used to play in a band called Stiff Meat. And I might be paraphrasing it wrong, but I'm pretty sure they had a song called Your Car's a Piece of Shit and I Just Fucked Your Girlfriend. And I remember asking someone about it, and they're like, "Oh yeah," that one of them said, in a drunken moment to someone else, "No, sorry, it's not. I just fucked your girlfriend. It's your car's a piece of shit, and I want to fuck your girlfriend."
That's so funny.
Anyway, and then he was also in a band called Pillow, who were awesome. And Pillow was like a bunch of, high school mates. And then, so they've all gone on to be in, these bands might not mean anything to the US. But anyway, Youngie is a really good dude. And the King Parrot are one of those examples of like, they totally earned that, like they just went really hard and toured to a lot of places. Same deal with us. It's just that we haven't enjoyed the success, but they will always go to places that other people won't go to, and they'd all
right. Yeah, that's what I saw them.
And they'd all been in other bands that Slats, the bass player, he was in a band called Cockfight Shootout. We used to play with a bit, and they've all kind of put in a lot of time, and then it's just awesome that it worked out.
You know who else is sort of like that as well? I've seen these guys live like 7 times or something, and I've been seeing them for years. Psychroptic. Those guys blew up.
Yeah, okay, so I've never been that familiar with them. I think that we might have rehearsed in one of their spaces in Tasmania. I've got to be honest, Psychroptic's always been a band to me that when I think people assume that we know more about the metal scene than we do, and I just always nod. I'm like, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then like, fuck, who are they? They're just a name that I keep hearing. Yeah.
So we're kind of coming closer to the end of things. And before we do, we want to give you a chance to sort of talk about Raving Drooling a bit because it is your latest release. And I was a huge fan of it personally. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the album, maybe about like some of the guests you had on? What was your favorite track type thing?
We always have a lot of music on the go. Basically, Jace, if you give him a few days where he's got the time and he's not organising his family or working too much or whatever, he'll write, a whole batch of songs. And when he's in that mode of writing, you can sort of order songs from him, really. I can just sort of say, oh, can you write something, a bit in the vein of, such and such, and he'll kind of do it. I tend to do the production, like the producing of our records. And it's just one of those things where it's like, because Jace is doing the bulk of the writing, he's, that's where he's like exercising his creativity. And then I get to do a bit of the arranging and the sort of, all right, how's the album going to look? So increasingly, we don't make our albums just a random collection of whatever songs we've written that year. You know, some songs sit around for, you know, years before they make it to an album. So with Raving Drooling, the approach we took, and again, we always have things that are just a starting off point, and they're not necessarily something that we rigidly have to adhere to, but they're just kind of ways of us kind of starting our ideas. So anyway, Raving Drooling was, the point of it was to be our version of a kind of more straight, hard out sort of album, because we sort of felt, oh yeah, we've kind of faffed around a bit on the last few albums with interludes and this and that, and so this will be the album that's a bit more just meat and potatoes. And then somewhere along the way, this might sound stupid, but I just started seeing the colours. And the colours of the album were the front cover, the same colours as on Pink Floyd Animals. So then I sort of started...
Right.
Yeah, so then I sort of started saying to Jace, all right, that's how I think of this album. This album is going to be as kind of dark and aggressive as that album was, you know, for that band. I've told myself I'd never say this on air because I just wanted people to work it out for themselves. But anyway, some people know, because it's super obvious if you're a Pink Floyd fan, which I grew up being. So Raving Drooling was the original title of one of the songs off Animals, or Raving and Drooling, I should say. And I always loved that. I always thought, that's sort of, and I almost felt like, it almost sounds like the sort of name that Roger Waters comes up with, and then the rest of the band say, oh, no, that's a bit too dark, mate. So anyway, that was our approach to the album, is we were like, all right, we're going to select the songs that are more... this is our example. I don't know why, because they're not necessarily our favourite band. I mean, I love them to bits, but we always think of Unsane. You know, Unsane make great records. Their sound you can't fault. Their playing you cannot fault. Like, they fucking lay it down so hard. But I always find myself after about 6 or 7 songs of theirs going, oh, man, I think I've had enough, you know, just because they just don't really let up.
Right.
But yeah, Raving Drooling became an album where basically we decided, look, the first half is definitely going to be just, we're not going to faff about so much. We're not going to be so dynamic. And then somewhere on the second album, on the second side, is almost where we have to do the obligatory dead thing, which is, all right, all those people that we just got on board because we finally did a fucking record without, you know, interludes and stuff, we're going to lose them all now by doing a 13-minute, you know, kind of ambient piece at the end. But yeah, I don't really know how to explain it. I just, when I know, like, I spend a long time with our records deciding on how the track list is going to go, and then how I'm going to mix it according to what that track list is. And to me, like all our albums, it's an album. Like, it's conceived as a single album. And whenever we're mixing, you know, whoever we're mixing with, the studio engineer always sort of says things like, most people aren't going to hear it on a proper stereo and stuff anymore. And I'm like, I don't care. I just don't care. Like, I have to make it the way I want to make it. And I get it that, you know, some kid's going to listen to it on his iPhone without earphones and go, oh, it sounds like shit. Yeah, on shuffle.
On shuffle.
But for us, well, you know, and there's always, like, you know, whenever we put out a record, I usually get like a handful of emails from people saying, oh yeah, you know, I bought the album, but I haven't listened to it yet because I want to, like, you know, sit down at the turntable, you know, with the headphones and just go start to finish. And I'm just like, that's so fucking great that still exists, you know. So that's how we tend to conceive an album. Having said that, the next album we put out is not in that way. But yeah, so that's and then getting the guests was Creston. Well, actually, I'll give you the whole story. Originally, Joe Preston was going to play on the album, and he just ended up having the shittiest year. And he, had some people die on him and some other stuff, and the poor dude was really going through a rough time. So it ended up being like, all right, we actually wrote the album. I kind of forgot this. We actually wrote the album knowing that he was going to play guitar on it. So we wrote it to sort of suit, his kind of chunky way of playing. And then when he wasn't able to do it, Jace just went in and played most of the guitar parts. And so, yeah, that was the other part of it. I forgot about this. It was sort of our version of a power trio record, where the guitar parts were more deliberate. And, yeah, I don't know, it was just a general vibe. I guess because there's only the two of us, it's pretty easy to get a vibe happening and be on the same page, And I just think of it as...
Right.
I suppose if you think of the band as a triangle or something, there's me, and then there's Jace, and then the third member is what happens in the gap between, and that's what we both sort of focus on. That's usually the more exciting bit is, what was the thing that neither of us thought was going to happen? And then it went and happened. So, yeah, to us, it's our version of a metal album, but we get it that it's not necessarily, some people would look at it or hear it and go, it's not a fucking metal album, it's bullshit. But to us, that's, we love metal. It means a lot to us. We've grown up listening to, early sort of metal bands, and for us, Raving Drooling is our tribute, I guess, to that sort of music, whether it be Motorhead, Deep Purple, Slayer, it doesn't matter, just anything fucking good. Anything that makes you just want to fucking, kick the table over or whatever, You know what I mean? It's that, yeah. Someone described it well the other day, when a song's so good that it makes you late for work. And I remember that when I was in school, and I'd walk to school and I would stand outside the schoolyard and the principal would look at me like, fuck you, I know you're late. And I'd be like, fuck you, this song hasn't finished and I'm not walking in until the song is finished.
I do that a lot where I'm going places. I'll finishing up a song, I'll check a text message or something real quick, and then I'll be like, all right, let's keep moving.
Yeah, and it's so, to me, you can't ask for more than that, that you forget that not everyone has that. For some people, music is just a background thing or whatever. For us, it's, well, for me particularly, I don't know, it's everything, it's so intrinsic that you have to every now and then stop and think, oh shit, this doesn't mean the same thing to everyone as it does to me. But to me, there's
right. That blows my mind though. Like you meet those people, right? And you're like, oh, what do you listen to? What's your favorite band or whatever? And they're like, oh, I don't really have a favorite band. Whatever's just playing. I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah.
How can you exist like that?
And the more you get into it, the more then people will kind of accuse you of being, oh, you're a snob or you're too picky or something. It's like, no, it's not that. It's just that it means so much to me now. It's probably like I don't mean to make, it's like a positive version of being addicted to a drug or something where you need, the more you go into it, the more you need, when I was a kid, I don't know, I think of songs, you only had what you could get, so I remember, pre-internet and all that shit, I remember hearing bands like Pearl Jam and thinking, I know we can do better, but I don't know what it is, so this is going to have to do, so I would listen to a Pearl Jam song over and over, but now I don't have to. And then you discover better and better stuff. And so for me, there's sort of nothing quite like, that I guess it's endorphins, isn't it, that you get when you hear something that moves you again for the first time. And sometimes I think, oh shit, it's been months since I've discovered a new band. Am I losing my, enthusiasm? And then you're like, no, it comes along and you just go, whoa, shit, no, there it is. It just took something, to really blow me away.
We sometimes post in bigger groups just as the page type thing and just ask people some general questions, and we find a lot of new bands doing this. We go something like, what was your favorite album of the year type thing, or what bands really stood out to you this year that you discovered? And like you get these people who be like, "Oh man, 2020 has been terrible. There's no good music this year." I'm like, "Are you crazy? Like,
are you living under a rock?"
Yeah, you're in an age where there's more music coming out than ever before, and you have more ways to access it than ever before. So I think it's more than people having bad taste. I think it's more the fact that people don't know how to find music and don't know where to look for
and
music.
A lot of things that traditionally were done for them. Yeah, so you can only work with what you have. So I don't tend to dwell on the fact that there are things from the industry that aren't as good as they used to be, because there are other things that that we have access to, like doing this interview right now with someone on the other side of the world. In the 90s, that would have been not really possible. But there was also, what did exist prior that doesn't exist so much now is, I guess, because there were less avenues, it meant that, people didn't have to do as much digging to find something that really, that they liked, because you just, if you lived in regional Australia, for example, you might have only had 2 radio stations, and then you get lucky that there's a weird dude down the street that smokes a lot of pot and, mail orders CDs and stuff, and he's willing to make tapes for it. You got to find. I think now, I don't know. Like I do meet younger people who just absolutely gorge themselves on underground music, and I think, great, that's still alive. Like, they're not, but they also, I kind of worry that how could they ever focus on any of it, because there's literally no limit. So I'm with you when people say shit like that. Oh, there's no one doing anything good anymore. I just think, well, your failure to put any effort in is not on them. That's on you.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's there, and if you want it, you will be able to find it. But you might just have to put in a tiny bit of effort.
The internet now is like all you have to do is like follow up a page, or like Rob Hammer's page. Like, that guy's putting out hundreds of bands. Like, this year alone, like I literally hundreds and hundreds of bands. I met maybe even close to 1,000 if you think about it. Like, just so much music, and that's just in like the doom and the kind of metal genre, not including anything else like psychedelic rock or anything. So it's just a shame that people are just lazy or just stuck in their own ways. Like, I always say to James, like, if you don't try anything different, you're never going to learn anything new. Like, those people just get stuck, and they're just going to always be listening to Slayer and Pantera for the rest of their lives. And that's the thing.
And I think, this is something, it's funny, because I think maybe all 3 of us, and definitely Jace too, might all be the same in this way. I was a long way into playing music. And I mean, I'd been playing for probably over 10 years live before I started to get my head around the idea that, not everyone that goes to gigs is obsessed with music. Because I sort of, I didn't understand why people wanted to go to the gig that everyone was going to. I was like, wouldn't you just want to go to the gig that has the bands that you want to see? Because, that was me. I was like, I got my license maybe 2 days after I turned 18, and I would finish work and I would drive to wherever it was. I would go and stand at a gig on my own, not drink anything because you got to drive home. I'd be so stoked, because I just saw a band I love. And only later did I realize, there's other layers to it. For some people, it's partly about being social, or about, being somewhere they feel comfortable, or where they feel welcomed, or whatever. And I think the same with music is you have several layers, like if you peel an onion or something, you have these core fans that just, it sounds like, us 3 are the same. All we care about is the music being awesome, and we'll put a bit of effort in. But there's a whole lot of other fans for whom, I guess, they're not doing that little bit of extra effort, and they do need it more. I'm not going to say spoon-fed, they don't, but they need it more pushed on them, and probably now more than ever. Like, I've got a constant list in my head of like, I'm aware that band that I like put out a record, but I haven't had time to sit down and, like, stream it off Bandcamp or something. And then if I don't hear about it again, it kind of gets replaced by something else, so you almost need to be reminded 5 or 6 times. And it's like, if you look back at bands over the years at an underground level or whatever, without fail, every time their best-selling record is the one that had the most money put behind it. Like, always. Band like Melvins or something. What's the album everyone knows? It's Houdini. It's the one when they were on a major label, But it's been 20 years since then, and they've done way better shit. But it hasn't had the same level of push behind it, I suppose. So it's unfortunate that, and we've even noticed it at our level. So the more we spend time on promoting a record, the more that record will sell. And the less, and nothing ever sells itself.
I think, like, for me, what I've been doing to kind of like listen to new music and whatever, I've been doing, I use Bandcamp a lot, and I just load up my wish list with like, all right, I got to listen to this later. I got to do this later, And then after I listen to it, I want to keep it on there. I want to like purchase it later or whatever. It just keeps growing and growing and growing, Like, I was looking at my wish list here. It's like 1,050 albums on there, and like my collection is only like 479, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I'm following 1,311 bands, It's like, if I don't add them onto the follow, like I got them in the wish list, you know what I mean? And then like it's wild though, but like I keep going back to that wish list, and it goes back really far, like when I first started Bandcamp, but they have albums on there that are just sitting there waiting to be like listened to or re-listened, So people got to put in the effort, man.
Yeah, and you needed something to kind of give you the again, not necessarily. I don't necessarily need this, but I think a lot of people, it helps to have a story or something, that kind of pulls you in. Oh, that's the band that, whatever it is. What's that band that was the bloody film, Dig?
You mean Mayhem with the movie come out recently? It brought a whole lot of new people into.
Is that? Yeah, I didn't actually even know that a movie had come out.
It's pretty.
Now I'm realising why everyone was banging on about
it. Did come out
for a while. Yeah, okay, that's making sense. Yeah. But no, sorry, I was thinking about that movie Dig. Is it Dig? Yeah, the band, the Brian Jonestown Massacre. And that.
Oh, right,
it's a good movie.
It
is. It's cool that someone made it. The band are just fucking brats. Like I cannot stand people that behave that way. And I more so can't stand that people that behave that way get the attention of a lot of people. You know what I mean? Like, and it's sort of like, oh, that's why.
Right.
That's partly why they've been so successful, is because the guy's an absolute prick, and for some reason people are drawn to that. But anyway, it's the story, isn't it? It's the fact that that other band, it's such a terrible story. The Danny Warhols, Danny Warhol's being really big, but they're loving this other band, Brian Jonestown Massacre, who aren't so big, and then that becomes, as far as I know, that's why 90% of people who know them is because someone made a film about them. And again, was that band Anvil? How many of us would know them if it weren't for that film? It's a great film.
It's like there's a movie coming out about Armored Saint, I think it was, in the near future, and they'll probably draw a ton of attention. Yeah, and
it's worth having a story. I mean, you must be familiar with Bloodduster, yeah?
Oh yeah.
Bloodduster to me are a really good example of and I actually chat with Fuller, the bass player, a fair bit, and actually rang him, before we put out this recent album, just for like a bit of advice on what do you think we should sort of, like, I sent it to him and said, have a listen, what do you think, we should maybe do as far as promoting it? Because Bloodduster have been a band where musically I'm not really that bothered by them one way or another, but I've just loved the shit that they've done.
Right.
for me, the pinnacle was when they made that album that no one could listen to. You know, it was like, this is the thing when you play metal. You know, when you play metal, everyone thinks you're dumb, you know, and for some reason, particularly in Australia, we live in this world where if you're all somber and heartbroken, then that for some reason has more artistic value than if you've got a sense of humour. And I saw it best described, you know, by TISM, where, you know, they basically say, we're as good as Nick Cave, you know? And I'm like, yeah, I agree, you are. You're just as clever, you put just as much effort in. It's just that you're not as dark, you know? And so, yeah, there's this thing with metal where people think that people think that we're stupid or that we're cavemen or something, you know. And Blood Duster went and did that project where they made an album, finished it all the way to, you know, mastering it, listened to it, all decided they were happy with it, pressed it, created a lacquer master, you know, to press the records, and then they scratched the word cult into the masters so no one can play it. And then they destroyed the files. The best thing about it was when, you know, I was reading an interview with Fuller where someone was trying to have a go at him saying, isn't this just a promo, you know, can't remember how he worded it, isn't this just like a promotional trick or something? And yeah, publicity stunt. Stunt? And Fuller says, yeah, and it's a fucking good one because, you know, you've never spoken to us before and now you are. And he basically just calls him on it. And he goes, what isn't part of publicity when you play music? Like, everything you do is potentially, unless you want to just exist in a cave, and which you can totally do. But if the day you put your music on Bandcamp, you are saying at some level, I would like someone to listen to this, you know? So no one can claim that they're not engaging in promoting their music, except for maybe, you know, I once met a woman on tour who, she was a painter, but she also made all this full-on noise music. And I was like, fuck, some of this is gnarly, dude. You should, like, put it out. And she was like, nah, like, I literally just make that noise when I can't paint. And I got no interest in anyone hearing it. I don't care. Like, it just serves a function. And I was like, that's pretty cool. But anyone else, you know, if we're releasing stuff, we want people to hear it at some level. So anyway, I just thought that thing, you know, Blood Duster there were making a more artistic statement than most, a deeper artistic statement, I should say, than most, in the sense that their whole thing was, you know, we've made the record, we know we like it, it's for us, and fuck you. You're like, we're sick of the fact that we don't get to control any of that anymore, that, you know, everyone just, you know, rips everything off on the net. And I just thought it was a cool thing that they did. It was about as pure as you can get as far as music, even though I know the whole thing's kind of a joke, like everything is for them. I was like, that's great. You made a record start to finish, and in the end, you just made it for you, you know? And
for all anyone knows, they could use those tracks at a later date, not saying they would, but no one would ever know.
Totally. Well, I think, they did actually, an EP came out, so you got a little bit of that, but not the whole thing. And actually this COVID thing has been a good example of that stuff, as far as early on, particularly early on, when we were like, shit, man, no one knows what's happening and when we'll ever be, you know, we're still not allowed into Melbourne or any other state. We certainly can't play a show. Early on, we just decided we will keep playing every week, just the two of us. Like, that's actually all that really matters. No, it's not all that matters, but that matters enough that we will keep writing albums, even if they're just for the two of us, even if we can't, you know, ever get in a recording studio again. And that actually felt really good, because I was like, fuck, that's what music was in the very beginning, wasn't it? Like, when I was 12 years old, that's what I would do. I would play, you know, 6 hours straight, you know, every Saturday night with a bunch of friends. You never thought about having an audience. So, yeah, it's kind of been a weird time for that. But it's been good to reestablish that actually this is hugely important, you know.
I actually just saw the time. We normally try to keep around an hour. We've done about an hour and a half. No problem at all, man. It's been great chatting. So we might actually have to have you back on sometime to do another hour and a half sometime. But Is there anything you kind of want to put out there before we close things up?
No, just that, we're working on new stuff. We're really appreciative that this has been pretty amazing for us to have to release an album without a single show to support it, because, we've always basically, that's the way that we've supported records, is to just go on tour. So it's been pretty amazing to see that people have engaged with this album despite, us not being able to get out there and play. And that's felt really good. And it's felt like, the music industry, at least the underground version of it, is resilient and adaptable. And, I don't want to have to bust out the Kleenex or anything. I'm not, don't want to get too emotional, but it's felt really, really great that, in some ways we're connecting more or just as much as ever. And doing stuff like this means a lot to me, because it's like, cool, we're all still doing what we can, in the music world. We're not just sitting around waiting till things start again.
Right.
So that's, I just basically want to say thanks to you and thanks to the, people around the world that have been engaging with our music during this time.
Thanks so much for coming on. It's been really good chatting with you. Time just flew by. For anyone who hasn't checked them out yet, make sure you go check out Dead. Have a look at We Empty Rooms as well, which is the label attached there. There's a lot of great music under there, and it might get you into some more Australian bands if you're not too familiar with the scene. And thanks so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.